Welcome, traveler. Wherever you have found this moment, let the noise beyond it soften for a while. Settle into whatever feels comfortable, and if you enjoy these quiet journeys through the past, you may gently support human and time with a like or a subscription. And now, without needing to go anywhere at all, let us step into another city. It is still dark over Venice. Not the darkness of an empty place, but the darkness of a city waiting just beneath its own reflection. The year is somewhere in the final decade of the 16th century. The stone Rialto Bridge now stands where an older wooden crossing once carried footsteps across the Grand Canal. The Republic is wealthy, disciplined, crowded, and old enough to have learned how to hide its labor beneath beauty. Its palaces rise from water. Its warehouses open toward water. Its servants, merchants, magistrates, craftsmen, priests, boatmen, and messengers move through a city where streets are only half the story. And somewhere in Cannaregio, before the greater city has begun to speak, a gondolier is already awake. We do not know his name. There is no need to give him one. Men like him passed through the records of Venice in fragments as boatmen, ferry workers, household servants, working people of the Espopolani world. They were essential to the city, and yet rarely the people for whom histories were written. Their work lived in motion rather than in marble. A passenger stepped aboard. A coin changed hands. A body leaned into an oar. A boat disappeared around a bend, so we will follow the movement rather than the name. The room he leaves is modest, and the air beyond the doorway is colder than the air within. Late autumn has settled over the lagoon. November does not arrive in Venice with snow or silence alone. It comes as dampness. It clings to wool, settles along brick, hides distant roofs behind low mist, and gathers in the narrow channels until water and air almost become the same grey surface. His clothing is ordinary. A linen or wool shirt beneath a practical layer. Breeches. A heavier cloak for the wet cold. A simple cap. Nothing striped. Nothing designed for an audience. There are no ribbons, no bright costume made to turn labor into spectacle. He dresses like a working man because that is what he is. Outside, the stones are dark with moisture. A narrow canal waits between buildings whose lower walls disappear into shadow. The water is restless without appearing to move. Small ripples touch brick and Istrian stone, then return. Somewhere farther away, beyond the roofs, the lagoon is breathing through its tide. His gondola is not the long, polished black vessel familiar to later centuries. It is shorter, broader, less sharply asymmetrical, a working craft rather than an icon. Its wooden surfaces are darkened by use, pitch, moisture, and repeated repair. A single long oar rests near the stern. Beside it is the forecolor, the carved wooden support through which the whole boat may be driven, turned, slowed, or held almost still. He steps aboard. The boat lowers slightly under his weight, then rises. There is always this brief negotiation between body and water. Even before the first passenger arrives, his work begins with attention. A little water may have gathered in the hull. Moisture must be cleared. The wood must be checked. Rope must be where the hand expects it. The oar must settle correctly into the forecolor. A worker whose day depends upon balance cannot begin carelessly. He bends, lifts, wipes, checks. Nothing dramatic happens. This is important. Most days in the past were built from gestures too ordinary for chronicles. A rope tightened, a sleeve pulled down against cold. a wooden edge tested by the thumb, a breath released into fog, and somewhere in this accumulation of small movements, a civilization woke each day. The first sound to carry clearly over the roofs is a bell, then another. Venice keeps time through metal suspended high above water. Bells cross canals more easily than voices. Their sound moves over roof tiles through mist, past church facades, and down into small alleys where darkness still holds. Hours here are not understood exactly as we understand them now. Venetian clocks belong to a world in which the day is measured differently, where sunset helps order the count of hours, and where bells tell working people what the sky may still conceal. The gondolier does not need a pocket watch. The city itself speaks the hour. He pushes away. The first stroke is quiet. The oar enters water with little more than a soft cut, and the gondola glides into the narrow Rio. The stern shifts. The bow aligns. Behind him, the place where the boat had rested is already only water again. From this height, Venice looks different. A person walking over bridges sees doors, walls, campi, shop fronts, church entrances, and the upward movement of towers. A boatman sees the city from below. He sees stone foundations wet at the waterline. He sees algae clinging where the tide repeatedly reaches. He sees iron rings fixed into walls. He sees steps descending directly into canals, their lowest surfaces dark and slick. He sees heavy water gates opening not into ceremonial halls, but into erzandroni and storage spaces, where cargo can pass directly from boat to building. This is a city designed to receive things by water: grain, timber, wine, stone, fish, letters, people. The canal is not decoration. It is road, loading yard, threshold, passage, and workplace. At this hour the smaller channels remain subdued, but Venice is not asleep. From somewhere behind a wall comes the dry movement of wood being handled. A baker has been awake long before the people who will eat his bread. Ovens require preparation before sunrise. Fire has its own schedule. A little farther on, the gondolier catches the smell before he sees anything smoke: damp brick, then bread beginning to warm the air around a workshop. The scent lasts only a moment. The boat keeps moving. This is how Venice enters the senses, not all at once, but in fragments carried past the body: wood smoke, lagoon mud, cold stone, a faint trace of fish, wet rope, then water again. At a junction, the canal opens enough for another boat to appear from the grey, a working skiff low in the water. The men aboard are barely shapes. A short call passes between boatmen before the vessels meet at the blind turn. Such warnings are part of the knowledge of the canals, as necessary as knowing the depth of water or the pull of a current. The gondolier adjusts his oar. A small movement at the stern turns the whole craft. The boats pass. Neither stops. The water left behind them presses briefly against the walls. The sound echoes longer than the boats remain in sight. As the sky lightens, the canal begins to reveal its color. Not blue, not yet. Under fog it seems made from lead, smoke, and diluted pearl. Reflections break before they can become clear. Ahead a servant crosses a bridge carrying a basket. Then another figure follows. A shutter opens above the water. Someone throws back a wooden panel and looks briefly at the weather. In an upper room a candle still burns. The gondolier moves beneath the bridge, and for a moment the stone arch compresses sound around him. The dip of the oar grows louder. Water taps the masonry. A footstep overhead becomes a hollow thud. Then the boat emerges. Morning is beginning to take possession of the city. Near the wider routes, activity increases quickly. Food must arrive before buyers. Firewood must arrive before hearths. Fish must arrive before the market fills. Venice consumes constantly, yet much of what it consumes must come from elsewhere. The city rises from a lagoon that protects it and limits it at the same time. The surrounding mainland, the islands, the Adriatic and distant trade routes all feed this dense collection of brick, timber, stone and human appetite. Cargo boats enter carrying produce and fuel. Their hulls sit deeper than the gondola. A barge loaded with wood moves slowly, its weight obvious in the water. The boatman guiding it has less freedom in a narrow turn than the gondolier does. Another vessel carries baskets covered against dampness. Somewhere among the morning traffic are fish from the lagoon and beyond, heading toward Rialto. The gondolier has not yet reached the market, but the city is already pointing toward it. Rialto is more than a place, it is a rhythm. Goods converge there. Money converges there. News converges there. Merchants, brokers, porters, servants, boatmen, fish sellers, clerks, foreigners and officials all cross paths within the same crowded system. For a gondolier this means passengers. Before he reaches the busiest bend, he slows near a landing. A man waits. There is no need to invent his name either. He might be a merchant's servant, a clerk, a tradesman, someone whose morning business lies closer to Rialto. The precise identity matters less than the familiar action. The gondola approaches the stone steps. The gondolier adjusts the angle with the oar. Wood touches stone lightly. The passenger steps down. The boat shifts beneath him. Balance is shared whether the passenger thinks about it or not. The gondolier waits until the weight settles, then pushes away again. For a few minutes, two lives occupy the same narrow craft. One sits, one stands. One thinks about arrival, the other thinks about water. This small difference may explain much about labor. The passenger sees destination. The worker sees everything required to reach it. The canal widens. Other gondolas now appear more frequently, some carrying single passengers, some moving between fixed crossings, some belonging to wealthier households. Covered boats offer privacy from cold, rain, and curious eyes. The gondolier sees liveried servants at certain landings and recognizes boats associated with houses richer than anything he will own. Venice makes social rank visible. It appears in fabric, in architecture, in the number of servants waiting near a doorway, in the width of a palace facade, in who sits beneath shelter and who stands in the damp air. Yet all of them are carried by the same water. The gondola passes beneath windows framed by marble and others cut simply into brick. Some facades still carry the pointed language of Venetian Gothic architecture. Others display the more ordered proportions of the Renaissance. New taste has not erased the old city. Venice layers time instead of replacing it. From canal level, magnificence is mixed with decay. A pale stone balcony rises above plaster streaked by moisture. A grand portal stands over steps green near the lowest tide line. A carved window catches the growing light while the brick beneath it powders and stains. Beauty here is never separate from water long enough to remain untouched. The lagoon enters everything slowly. Stone, timber, iron, clothing, breath, perhaps even memory. The gondolier does not need to think this in words. He has known dampness all his life. The old traveller who watches him may think it for him. Civilizations often leave their proudest ideas in stone, but ordinary people know those stones by temperature, by weight, by how slippery they become after rain, by how long they hold the cold before sunrise. The passenger disembarks. A coin changes hands. The gondolier does not become richer in any meaningful sense. He simply becomes ready for the next crossing. Around him voices increase. A church door opens. A friar moves along a quay. Workers carry baskets. A boy hurries with something wrapped in cloth. A cargo boat scrapes too close to a wall, producing a long wooden groan. Someone calls from a landing. Another bell answers from farther away. The sounds overlap without becoming chaos. Venice is assembling itself. The gondolier enters the Grand Canal. Even after the narrow ray, the opening can feel sudden. Water broadens, sky appears. The city no longer presses close on both sides. Palaces rise along the curve of the canal, their water entrances facing the moving traffic like front doors onto an avenue. Here the gondolier joins the greater bloodstream of Venice. The tide, the oar, the weight of passengers, the wake of barges, the shape of the bend, and the intentions of other boatmen all become part of the same calculation. He does not perform this calculation as numbers. It lives in muscle memory, a pressure in the palm, a shift in the knees, a change in the angle of the oar, a glance toward another bow, a judgment made before thought has time to become language. The forecollar permits the oar to change position, giving leverage for different movements. To an observer it may look graceful. To the worker it is simply technique repeated until the body no longer asks how. He leans forward, the gondola advances. A heavier vessel crosses ahead, carrying goods toward the commercial heart of the city. The gondolier eases his stroke and lets it pass. Larger cargo cannot pivot with the same ease. On a crowded waterway, skill includes knowing when not to insist. Near Rialto, the air changes. The first clear smell is fish. Not one smell, but many. Fresh scales, salt, wet wood, water, the darker odor of scraps and blood. Vegetable leaves crushed underfoot. Smoke. Human bodies gathering close together. And behind all of it, from warehouses that connect Venice to distant places, the warmer scents of imported goods, pepper and other spices whose journeys have been far longer than the gondolier's entire day. The water itself grows busier. Boats arrive with goods and leave lighter. Porters work near the edges. Merchants begin their negotiations. Money changers and bankers prepare for business. Servants move between stalls with lists carried in memory or on paper. The gondolier's world narrows and expands at the same time. His boat has only a few feet of useful space, yet from it he can pass every layer of the Republic. A German merchant attached to the Affondaco Die Tedeschi may cross his path. A household servant might hire passage with a basket of purchases. A minor official may need to reach San Marco later. A friar may stand quietly under a cloak. A foreign traveller may stare too long at the city because everything here seems impossible at first. Doors opening onto water, goods moving without carts, palaces whose foundations disappear below the canal surface. To the foreigner, Venice is astonishing. To the gondolier, it is Tuesday, or whatever this working day would have been called and counted within his own calendar of bells, saints, obligations, and tides. That difference is worth lingering over. What is wonder to one person is routine to another. The gondolier does not stop his boat to admire the city. He knows where water becomes shallow He knows where a cargo vessel may block a turn. He knows which landing becomes difficult when the tide changes. He knows the feel of damp wool on his shoulders. He knows that cold hands become less obedient if he rests too long. He knows that bread is more urgent than beauty. And yet perhaps this is one of the quieter truths of living inside any remarkable place. People rarely wake each day inside history. They wake inside work. The Rialto Bridge rises ahead. In this late 16th century morning, its pale stone is still comparatively new. The older wooden bridge that generations knew has been replaced by Antonio da Ponte's great single arch. Shops occupy the structure above. Feet cross over water while boats pass beneath. The gondolier approaches with the flow. Sound gathers under the arch. Voices from above. Water below. Wood against wood. The call of a boatman. A bell in the distance. A gull somewhere beyond the roofs. The gondola enters the shadow. For a few breaths, morning disappears. The stone overhead turns the canal into a resonant chamber. The oar enters blacker water. The passenger's clothing rustles behind him. Moisture seems colder here. Then the bow passes into light again. Rialto opens around them, and now Venice is fully waking. The fish market has become louder. A seller lifts his voice. A porter shifts a load from boat to quay. Coins strike wood. A warehouse door opens onto the canal. A clerk bends over a page. A servant argues over produce. A boat loaded with timber moves with stubborn slowness through faster traffic. The gondolier threads between them. There is no single sound of Renaissance Venice. There is the bell, the oar, the scrape, the market cry, the footstep, the hammer, the prayer, the bargaining voice, the gull, the water, and beneath all of them, almost too constant to notice, the quiet contact of the lagoon with stone. The passenger steps ashore near the commercial quarter. For a moment the gondola is empty again. The gondolier remains standing at the stern, one hand resting near the oar. The cold has not gone, but the city has begun to warm itself through movement. Smoke rises more steadily from chimneys. Sunlight pushes through thinning fog and catches the upper stories first. The lower canals remain in shade. A palace facade across the water receives a pale wash of morning, while directly beneath it the stone foundation stays dark and green along the tide line. The gondolier waits. Waiting is part of transport too. He is not always moving. At a public landing, boatmen watch people arrive and decide where the next fare may come from. Their profession ties them to the city's impatience. Someone always needs to cross. Someone is always late for business, carrying a message, visiting a relation, returning from a market, moving toward a government office, or trying to avoid walking the longer way over bridges. A second passenger approaches. Then another boat calls out. The working day begins to tighten around him. There will be hours yet before the light turns amber again. Hours of balancing, pushing, waiting, crossing, listening without appearing to listen, passing palaces he will never enter and workshops whose smells drift out over the water. He will move between people separated by wealth, rank, language, clothing, and purpose, while the lagoon makes all of them briefly dependent on the same narrow boat. He places the oar more firmly into the forecollar. The next passenger steps down, the gondola tilts, steadies, and leaves the landing. Ahead, the Grand Canal is brighter now. Boats are multiplying across its surface. The city has begun its full day's work, and the gondolier is already inside it. The passenger settles without ceremony, and the gondolier gives the boat a measured push into the current. By now the fog has lifted from the broadest reaches of the Grand Canal, though traces of it remain where narrow waterways disappear between buildings. Above the roofs, the sky has taken on the pale clarity of a late autumn morning. Below, the water keeps a darker color, broken continually by holes, oars, reflections, and the trembling wakes of passing boats. The gondolier does not hurry. Hurrying on water is different from hurrying on land. A man crossing a square may shorten his steps, slip between shoulders, turn suddenly beneath an arcade. A boat carries its own momentum. It must be persuaded rather than commanded. The gondolier feels the weight behind him and the movement ahead. His oar presses, releases, returns. Each stroke is part propulsion and part conversation with everything around him. Another gondola approaches. A cargo boat moves beyond it. Farther toward the bank, men unload baskets at a water entrance, while a servant waits above the lowest stone steps. The gondolier reads these movements almost without looking directly at them. The city is becoming crowded enough that skill is visible mostly through the absence of collision. He shifts the oar. The bow turns. A few feet of water appear where there had seemed to be none. They pass. Behind him, his passenger remains sheltered from much of the work required to make the journey seem effortless. Along the Grand Canal, Venice displays the wealth for which foreigners know it. Palaces stand close to the water, each facade competing quietly with the next. Marble surrounds windows. Columns divide openings. Carved stone catches the morning light. Some buildings carry the pointed arches and delicate tracery inherited from earlier centuries. Others speak in the calmer proportions of Renaissance architecture. Yet from the gondolier's position, grandeur is never seen alone. A palace may be magnificent above and practical below. At water level there are ropes, mooring rings, steps, dark entrances, timber, wet stone, men lifting goods, servants receiving deliveries. The lower portions of these buildings belong to the same physical Venice as warehouses and workshops. A wealthy household still requires firewood. It still requires food. Wine arrives in containers rather than ideas. Clothing must be carried. Messages must be delivered. People must come and go. The gondolier sees the hidden machinery beneath elegance, because his work takes place at the level where that machinery enters. A boat draws alongside one of the larger residences. Two servants begin transferring goods through the water entrance. The movement is practiced. One remains aboard. Another stands on the stone. Between them, the city's dependence on boats becomes visible in the simple passage of weight from hand to hand. The gondolier continues past. He has probably watched similar movements thousands of times. There are moments in every city that seem insignificant precisely because they happen too often to be noticed. A door opening, a sack lifted, a rope thrown, a boat arriving, and yet remove enough of these small movements, and even the grandest republic would become hungry by sunset. The passenger shifts behind him. Perhaps the destination is near San Marco. Perhaps another landing along the canal. The gondolier needs only the place he has been given and the route his experience has already begun to assemble. They glide past another palace. A face appears briefly at an upper window. Laundry hangs farther away, where the buildings become less ceremonious. A woman empties something into a household vessel beyond the gondolier's clear view. A servant shakes fabric near an opening. Then a church facade appears between houses, its presence announced by stone before another bell sounds above. Religion is never far from the rhythm of Venice. Churches rise throughout the sestieri, and bells divide the day in ways understood by merchants and laborers as naturally as by priests. Feast days, fasts, masses, processions, saints, and confraternities belong not to a separate religious world, but to the ordinary calendar by which work itself is arranged. The gondolier hears the bell. His hands continue moving. Faith and labor occupy the same minute. The sound spreads outward, touches the canal, and fades beneath the scrape of a cargo hull. Soon another sound takes its place. Hammering. At first it is distant and irregular. Then, as the gondola passes a side canal, it grows clearer from somewhere among workshops, wood being worked, metal struck, something fitted into something else. Renaissance Venice is full of hands. The paintings and palaces that later generations will preserve can make the city appear as though it were made chiefly by artists and patricians. But behind every decorated room lies a much larger world of people who cut, carried, polished, hammered, stitched, baked, rode, unloaded, repaired, cleaned, and sold. Carpenters shape timber, tailors work cloth, leather workers cut hides, printers arrange type. Shipwrights build vessels whose journeys may extend far beyond the lagoon, and boatmen move between them all. The gondolier himself belongs to this city of practiced bodies. His knowledge is stored in the shoulder and wrist as much as in memory. The oar is long enough that its weight would feel awkward to someone unfamiliar with it. In his hands it becomes precise. Pressure against the forecollar can change direction. A stroke may move the gondola forward, another movement may slow it or swing the stern. Balance changes when a passenger moves. Wind matters, tide matters. The wake of a heavier vessel matters. Even the shape of a canal matters. Water enclosed between walls behaves differently from open lagoon water. The gondolier knows this without needing to explain it. He has learned Venice in resistance, where the oar grows heavy, where the current helps, where the boat drifts, where the wind catches exposed water, where the tide leaves a landing awkwardly high or low. There are many ways to know a city. A merchant knows its prices. A priest knows its bells. A magistrate knows its laws. A porter knows its weight. And a gondolier knows how it moves beneath him. The passenger reaches his destination. The gondolier approaches the landing obliquely, slows the hull, and lets the final distance disappear almost without impact. The passenger rises. The boat reacts immediately. One foot reaches stone, then the other. Weight leaves the gondola, and the whole lifts slightly beneath the gondolier. Payment is made. No speech needs to survive for us to understand the exchange. Transport has been provided. Another small journey has ended inside a much larger working day. The gondolier pushes away. For a while he carries no one. The emptiness changes the boat. It responds more quickly now. The stern feels lighter. The bow seems more willing to turn. He moves toward a place where passengers commonly gather, passing beneath another bridge and entering a narrower canal. The sunlight almost vanishes. Buildings rise close enough here that only a strip of sky remains overhead. The change in temperature is slight but immediate. The air feels damper. Sound grows intimate. Conversation from an unseen room crosses the water. A chair scrapes somewhere above. Footsteps pass over a bridge. The gondolier hears a door close without seeing it. A kitchen smell drifts from an opening, perhaps onions softening near heat, perhaps fish, perhaps broth. It mingles with smoke and the heavier smell of the canal itself. At low water, the city reveals more of what the tide usually covers. Dark growth marks the foundations. Mud and organic matter give the air a stronger edge. Venice is beautiful, but beauty does not make its water clean, nor is the city simply a sewer floating beneath palaces. Its relationship with waste rain wells, cisterns, tides, and canals is more complicated than that. Fresh water cannot simply be taken from the lagoon. Beneath the city's campi, carefully constructed cistern systems collect and filter rainwater. The stone wellheads visible in squares above belong to an infrastructure hidden below people's feet. The gondolier passes them without seeing them. His own world is the other water, brackish, tidal, moving. Useful for travel but not for drinking. The distinction is part of everyday survival. A bridge opens ahead, and beyond it the canal widens enough for sunlight to reach the gondolier's hands. They are already marked by work. Cold has given way to warmth in the muscles, though dampness remains around cuffs and cloak. Standing for hours on a moving boat requires a quiet endurance. There is no bench waiting for him at the stern. His knees adjust constantly. His feet correct the boat's motion. His hands repeat movements that become tiring precisely because they must remain controlled. The work is physical without needing to be violent. Fatigue arrives slowly. It gathers, stroke by stroke. Crossing by crossing, the gondolier reaches another landing. This time, several people are waiting nearby. Another gondola has arrived before him, and for a few moments the boatmen occupy the same small territory of water. Competition exists in such places. So do rules. Venice regulates much of what keeps Venice functioning. Boatmen do not operate entirely beyond the Republic's attention. Fares, crossings, conduct, and the use of public transport have all attracted regulation because movement through the city is too important to be left entirely to chance. At certain points, traghetti carry passengers across the Grand Canal. Bridges are few enough that crossing by boat is not a luxury reserved for nobles. It is part of ordinary movement. People come to the water because the water is often the shorter road. A tradesman steps aboard one craft. A servant chooses another. The gondolier waits. For a man paid through movement, waiting has weight. He rests the oar differently. His shoulders loosen. He watches. This, too, is part of his knowledge of Venice. When a gondolier is moving, the city passes him. When he waits, the city comes to him. A porter walks along the quay carrying a burden that changes the shape of his posture. Two men speak near a doorway. A boy runs across a bridge and disappears. A woman in practical clothing pauses beside a basket. Farther away, better dressed figures descend from a palace entrance accompanied by servants. Clothing tells stories before mouths open. Fine fabrics, rich colors, carefully controlled ornament. Servants in attendance, these belong to a different economic world from the gondolier's wool and linen. Venetian society has divisions understood by everyone living within it. At the top stand the patrician families whose political status gives them access to the institutions of the Republic. Beneath and around them are citizens, merchants, professionals, artisans, laborers, servants, foreigners, immigrants, and the many working people whose hands keep the city alive. These categories matter. but from the stern of a gondola they sometimes become strangely compressed. A patrician and a porter cannot exchange lives. Yet each may need a boat. Water creates temporary proximities that society otherwise resists. The gondolier may stand only a few feet from someone whose household wealth exceeds anything he can imagine. He may hear voices that belong inside rooms closed to him. He may carry a passenger whose political decisions affect the entire city, and still, when the boat reaches the landing, the distance between them returns. Perhaps this is why gondoliers acquired associations with discretion. A covered gondola can become a private room moving through a public city. The fallacy, increasingly characteristic of passenger gondolas during this later 16th century world, offers shelter from weather and from observation. Inside, conversation can be hidden more easily than it could be on an open quay. The gondolier need not know what is said. His profession teaches another kind of wisdom. Not everything heard must become one's business. A passenger finally approaches. This one is accompanied by a servant. The gondolier steadies the boat while they enter. Fabric brushes against wood. A hand touches the side for balance. The gondola sinks fractionally lower. Then they are moving again. The route carries them back toward broader water. The narrow canal releases them into brightness, and the Grand Canal seems almost luminous after the enclosed shade. The morning has matured. Fog has withdrawn toward the lagoon or dissolved entirely. The facades now show colors that darkness had hidden: pale stone, brick, worn plaster, painted surfaces, dark timber, fabrics hanging near windows. Reflections shake beneath them. A red tone becomes brown in water. White marble becomes silver. A window breaks into 10 pieces with every ripple. Nothing reflected in a canal is permitted to remain whole. The gondolier passes a merchant boat, then another gondola, then a barge carrying materials that will disappear into some building project and become part of Venice's apparently permanent face. Stone arrives by boat before it becomes architecture. Timber arrives by boat before it becomes roof, door, ship, scaffold, or furniture. Even permanence must first float. The gondolier's passenger says something quietly to the servant. The words are not important to us. Beyond them, the city is speaking more loudly now. The morning market has reached its confident hour. Workshops are open. The Rialto is crowded. Business is being conducted in several languages. Venice draws foreigners because its wealth depends upon connections extending far beyond the lagoon. German merchants have their regulated commercial home near Rialto at the Fondaco dei Tedeschi. Traders and goods arrive from worlds the gondolier may never see himself. Spices have crossed seas. Fine fabrics carry distant labor inside their threads. Information moves with merchants as naturally as cargo does. The gondolier can spend his entire life traveling only a few miles and still touch the edges of continents. A passenger from elsewhere steps into his boat. A crate from another coast passes beside him. A foreign word is shouted across a quay. A spice he could never afford enters his nose through the open door of a warehouse. The world comes to Venice, and Venice, through its ships, goes out to meet the world. But the gondolier's own horizon remains lower, a bow, a bridge, a landing, a hand raised for passage. Perhaps that is enough. Human beings do not need to possess the world in order to live at its crossroads. The gondola turns again. San Marco lies nearer now. The architecture becomes increasingly associated with the ceremonial face of the Republic. Government, religion, diplomacy, wealth, and spectacle converge around the great open spaces facing the basin. But the approach from water is different from approaching on foot. The gondolier first sees openness. After the compressed canals, the basin seems to release the entire city. Wind has more room here. The smell of the lagoon becomes cleaner and stronger. Birds cross wider sky. Larger vessels can be seen beyond the intimate scale of the inner canals. The passenger's cloak moves slightly in the breeze. The gondolier feels the cold return to the damp fabric at his shoulders. Ahead, the domes and facades around San Marco rise into clearer view. The Doge's palace stands beside the water, its stone arcades giving the massive building an almost improbable lightness. Nearby, the Basilica of San Marco gathers forms and surfaces accumulated through centuries of Venetian power and devotion. The gondolier does not enter the rooms where councils meet. He does not sit among patricians. He does not receive foreign ambassadors, but he can bring people to the edge of that world. This is another feature of his profession. He is always arriving at thresholds, the threshold of a palace, the threshold of a market, the threshold of a church, the threshold of government. He delivers people into spaces from which he himself remains excluded, and then he turns back to the water. Near the molo, movement becomes more ceremonial without ceasing to be practical. Officials pass. Servants wait. Visitors arrive. Boatmen maneuver for position. Goods continue to move, because even the political heart of Venice must eat, burn fuel, receive messages, repair walls, clean rooms, and maintain bodies. A foreign traveller pauses before stepping ashore and looks upward longer than a Venetian would. The gondolier has seen this expression before. Visitors often arrive prepared for a city. Venice gives them water instead. They expect streets. They find boats. They expect foundations. They see buildings descending into canals. They expect the ordinary separation between land and sea. Venice refuses it. For the gondolier, there is nothing miraculous here. He adjusts the boat against the landing. The passenger and servant disembark. The gondola rises. Payment passes into his hand. For a brief moment he remains beside the stone steps while other vessels move around him. The open basin breathes differently from the canals. Wind touches his face. The water carries small, irregular waves. Salt and brackish dampness mingle in the air. Beyond the ceremonial facades lies the lagoon, and beyond the lagoon, routes toward the Adriatic. He could turn his eyes outward and imagine distances, but another passenger is already waiting. The gondolier moves again. This time the route bends away from the grandest facades. The change happens gradually. Venice does not divide neatly into splendor and labor. They overlap. A noble residence may stand near a workshop. A church may face a quay busy with deliveries. A servant may cross paths with a merchant carrying business worth more than the building beside them. The gondola enters smaller water. Hammering returns, then sawing. Then the deeper impact of work being done on heavy timber. The sounds hint at the industrial Venice farther east, where the arsenal occupies a world of state, controlled shipbuilding, rope, timber, sailcloth, metal, and disciplined labor. The gondolier cannot simply wander through its restricted spaces. He does not need to. The arsenal announces itself beyond its walls. Materials move toward it. Workers move around it. Noise escapes it. The smell of timber and pitch belongs to the surrounding air. Venice's power at sea depends upon thousands of movements that rarely appear in ceremonial paintings. A ship begins as trees, as rope fibers, as iron, as cloth, as measurements, as hands, and before those materials become a vessel capable of crossing the Mediterranean, many of them travel through the city by water. The gondolier passes a boat carrying timber. Its cargo rises above the gunwales in rough lengths, wet from mist and handling. The smell is fresh and resinous beside the older odors of canal water. For a moment it replaces everything else. Then it passes. A hammer strikes somewhere behind a wall once, twice again. The gondolier rows onward. By now the morning cold has retreated from the center of his body. Work has warmed him beneath the cloak. His hands remain exposed enough to feel the changing moisture of the air, the smooth places on the oar worn by repeated contact, the subtle resistance when the blade enters disturbed water. Hunger begins not as pain but as awareness. He has been working since before the city brightened. Around him, food is everywhere without necessarily belonging to him. Bread passes in baskets. Fish lie on market tables. Wine moves in containers. Kitchen smells escape from houses. The wealthiest tables in Venice may receive spices, elaborate dishes, fine breads, meats, sweets, and imported luxuries. A working boatman needs something simpler. Bread matters. Fish may matter. Cheese, vegetables, legumes, modest wine. Food that can sustain a body without requiring ceremony. The New World has already begun changing European diets, but change is uneven. Ingredients that later generations will imagine as eternally Italian do not yet define the ordinary meal in the way they eventually will. The gondolier does not know that future. He only knows hunger. A little later, perhaps when the flow of passengers allows it, he will stop. Not for long. The city is too active now. The sun has climbed high enough to reach more of the water, though narrow canals still preserve their own cold shadows. The gondolier turns beneath another bridge. Above him, people cross without looking down. His oar touches the water. A bell sounds again. Somewhere nearby, bread is being cut. Somewhere farther east, a hammer falls onto timber. And around the next bend, another landing is already coming into view. The landing is busier than it first appeared from the bend. A pair of men stand near the steps, one with a bundle tucked beneath his arm, another looking toward the water as though calculating how long he is willing to wait. The gondolier brings the boat in slowly. The oar presses against the water, then rises, dripping. The gondola settles beside the stone. A passenger steps aboard. The weight shifts. The gondolier steadies himself and pushes away again. By now, the day has lost the softness of early morning. Light falls more directly onto the upper facades, and the shadows below them are sharper. The air is still cool in the narrow canals, but where the water opens toward the basin or the broader reaches of the Grand Canal, the sun begins to warm exposed stone. The gondolier feels both conditions at once. Cool dampness at the edge of his cloak, warmth across his face, the repeated pull of the oar in his shoulders, the quiet emptiness beginning in his stomach. The passenger does not travel far. They cross toward another part of the city, passing a row of water entrances where goods are being received. A wooden door stands open above a short flight of wet steps. Inside, the ground floor of a building disappears into shadow, more warehouse than residence. Men move in and out carrying weight between boat and interior. Above them, carved windows look down on the canal. The contrast would seem strange only to someone unfamiliar with Venice. Here, beauty and storage share the same wall. A palace can be a statement of family prestige on the upper floors and a practical machine for receiving goods below. The gondolier passes close enough to hear a rope tighten around an iron ring. Then the sound fades. A little farther on, a bell marks another portion of the day. The passenger disembarks. The gondolier does not immediately seek another fare. For the first time since before dawn, he allows the boat to drift toward a quieter edge of the canal. Work must pause somewhere, not ceremonially, not for long, only enough for the body to return to itself. He ties the gondola where it can rest without obstructing the passing traffic and steps onto the damp stone. For hours, the city has been moving beneath him. Now the ground does not move. The change is almost strange. His knees have spent the morning correcting small shifts in the hull. His feet have adjusted to every wake, every turn, every passenger boarding or leaving. On stone, the body must remember stillness. The gondolier walks toward a modest place where working people can eat and drink. No silver, no elaborate table, no procession of courses. The city contains abundance, but abundance is distributed unevenly. At the Rialto, spices from distant ports pass through warehouses. Patrician households can buy foods and fabrics that represent journeys across the Mediterranean and beyond. Yet a boatman's meal belongs to another scale. Bread, beans or other legumes, perhaps fish, perhaps a simple porridge, depending on season and custom, a measure of inexpensive wine, food whose first purpose is not display, but continuation. He sits. The room is warmer than the canal. After hours in cold air, the warmth feels heavier than expected. Damp wool begins to release its own smell. Smoke clings to walls. Somewhere nearby there is garlic, perhaps onions, perhaps fish cooked simply. Wine has soaked into wooden surfaces over years of use. Other working men are here. Their occupations may differ, but their bodies carry similar signs. Hands roughened by material. Clothing made for endurance rather than admiration. A posture shaped by repetition. The gondolier eats without hurry, though he cannot remain long. Outside, Venice continues. A bell sounds faintly through the wall. A boat scrapes against stone. A voice rises and falls. The day does not pause because one worker has sat down. This may be one of the oldest arrangements between a city and those who sustain it. The worker rests. The work remains. He tears another piece of bread. The meal is plain enough that later centuries would scarcely think to record it. But ordinary food has its own history. Grain ground, dough mixed, ovens heated before sunrise, legumes stored, soak cooked, fish caught in lagoon or sea, wine brought from the mainland. Even simplicity is made from many journeys. The gondolier finishes, drinks, and rises. When he returns to the canal, the outdoor air feels colder again against the warmth of his face. His gondola is where he left it. The rope is damp in his hand. He steps aboard, and the familiar movement returns instantly beneath his feet. The city becomes water again. He pushes away. The next stretch of work carries him gradually eastward. The change is not announced. No gate marks the moment when ceremonial Venice begins to give way to a more industrial rhythm. It happens through sound. The hammering becomes more frequent. The smell of worked timber grows stronger. Pitch enters the air. boats carrying material appear with greater regularity. The arsenal lies ahead and beyond, enclosed, controlled, and immense. The gondolier does not enter its restricted world. He has no reason to. But the arsenal does not remain inside its walls. Its labor spills outward through sound, smell, traffic, and people. Shipwrights move through nearby spaces. Timber arrives. Rope and sailcloth are carried. Metal is worked. Inspectors and craftsmen require transport. The waterways around the great state shipyard belong to the same city-wide network that the gondolier already knows. A man waiting near a landing has the look of a worker rather than a passenger accustomed to servants. The gondolier approaches. The man steps aboard with tools. They move along the perimeter canals. No conversation needs to be invented between them. Their shared silence is enough. One man works with wood and ships, the other with water and boats. Both are surrounded by a republic whose wealth often appears to outsiders as architecture, ceremony, and trade, but whose power depends equally upon labor performed in places visitors may never see. A series of hammer blows travels over the water. The passenger barely reacts. The gondolier barely reacts. These sounds belong to their day. To us, centuries later, the arsenal may seem extraordinary, one of the great organized industrial centers of its world, capable of drawing together enormous quantities of material and skilled labor for the maritime needs of the Venetian state. To the men living beside it, it is also simply where people work. That distinction matters. History often turns places into symbols after the people who knew them as workplaces are gone. A shipyard becomes evidence of state power. A market becomes evidence of commerce. A palace becomes evidence of wealth. But a man standing in cold air beside timber does not experience himself as evidence. He is trying to complete a task. The gondolier rows past a boat carrying long pieces of wood. The timber smells different from wet stone, clean, resinous, earthbound somehow, even while floating. For a moment the scent recalls forests the gondolier may never have visited. Venice itself has little room for forests, yet forests are everywhere inside it, in piles, in beams, in roofs, in doors, in ships, in oars, in the gondola beneath his own feet. A city surrounded by water is held together by materials brought from land. The passenger disembarks near the arsenal perimeter. Another man waits farther along, then another. The gondolier moves between small journeys. The pattern repeats without repeating itself. Different destination, different canal, different sound. A worker smells of sawdust. Another carries rolled material. A servant hurries toward a household. A messenger keeps one hand near something he does not wish to lose. The gondolier carries each for a little while. The city reveals itself through these temporary companions. At one turning, the canal narrows beneath a bridge and then opens again beside a quieter residential stretch. Laundry hangs above the water. A shutter is partly closed against the stronger light. A woman leans briefly from a window and disappears. The sound of a child reaches the canal, then is swallowed by stone. Venice is not only palaces, markets, and state institutions. It is rooms, beds, cooking fires, arguments too quiet to reach the street, children carrying small responsibilities, women washing fabric, older people looking from windows, families sharing cramped spaces, servants entering doors that do not belong to them. The gondolier passes beneath all of it. In wealthier houses, The relationship between canal and home can be grand stone portals, broad steps, decorated entrances, servants waiting to receive visitors. In poorer quarters, water presses more closely against everyday life. The same dampness rises through walls. The same tide changes the distance between boat and threshold. The same fog enters clothing. The lagoon does not respect social categories, though people do. A nobleman may wear finer fabric. A laborer may wear coarse wool. Both fabrics become damp. The gondolier turns the thought without consciously forming it. Perhaps this is how philosophy belongs in ordinary life, not as a lesson, but as a fact the body encounters. Cold reaches everyone. Hunger reaches everyone. Time moves through every household. Only the protections against these things differ. Another bell crosses the roofs. The gondolier looks toward neither tower nor clock. The sound is enough. The hours of the day are advancing. Venetian time is not abstract. It is heard. It is tied to bells, light, work, prayer, opening and closing, the approach of evening. A person does not need to know the exact modern minute to understand that the day is moving. The gondolier feels it in his shoulders. The meal has taken away the sharpest hunger, but the work has returned immediately to the body. A narrow canal turns into another. A bridge passes overhead. Then another. The gondola slips through spaces so confined that a person at a window might speak to someone across the water without raising a voice. The city feels inward here, almost domestic. Then, at the next opening, Venice expands again. A busier quay appears. Goods are stacked near a building. A small cluster of men works around a boat. Farther away, a print shop or bookseller's world exists somewhere among the streets and canals of a city that has become one of Europe's great centers of printing. The gondolier may never read the books that move through these workshops. Literacy and learning do not belong equally to everyone. Yet printed paper increasingly surrounds the world he inhabits. State notices appear. Broadsheets circulate. Books travel. Maps are made. Words multiply through presses operated by craftsmen whose hands are blackened not by ore water but by ink. This is another form of movement. The gondolier moves bodies. Printers move words. Merchants move goods. Priests move prayers through ritual. Messengers move information. Venice is a city of circulation. Perhaps that is why water suits it so well. Nothing here stays still for long. A sheet is printed and carried away. A crate is unloaded and opened. A passenger steps ashore. A tide rises, a tide falls. The gondolier continues. Near a church, the canal becomes quieter. A doorway stands open. From within comes a faint trace of incense. Softened by distance and mixed with the damp air outside, people enter and leave. Religious images are part of the visible city saints in churches, small shrines, painted or carved figures, signs of devotion at corners and thresholds. The gondolier passes these things as he passes everything else. There is no sharp border between sacred time and working time. A man can hear a bell calling others to prayer while negotiating a fare. A woman can carry food home past a shrine. A servant can cross water to a convent. A shipwright can remove his cap before an image and return to hammering timber. The sacred rests inside the ordinary. The gondolier pauses near the landing while a passenger comes down the steps. This one is dressed better. Not extravagantly, but enough that the quality of fabric is visible even from a short distance. The passenger enters under shelter. The covered portion of the gondola changes the atmosphere immediately. Outside, the city remains open to wind and voice. Inside, sound softens, the passenger becomes less visible. Privacy is a form of wealth too. A covered boat allows a person to move through public water while remaining partly hidden from public view. The gondolier stands behind, separated by only a small distance and an enormous social one. He hears movement from inside, perhaps a cough, the shift of fabric, nothing that needs interpretation. The profession places him near many lives without granting him possession of their stories. This is a subtle kind of discipline. To carry someone is not to know them. To overhear is not to understand. To pass a palace every day is not to belong inside it. The gondolier guides the boat toward San Marco again, though not directly. Traffic thickens as they approach broader water. A cargo barge forces him to alter course. He waits for its heavy stern to pass, then crosses behind. The passenger scarcely feels the correction. Skill often disappears when it succeeds. The boat enters brighter water. Sunlight catches the upper surface of the lagoon and scatters toward the eyes. Istrian stone reflects it sharply. After the narrow, shadowed canals, the brightness can feel almost white. The gondolier lowers his gaze. His world returns to the practical. A wake, a crossing boat, a landing ahead, the passenger disembarks. Another fare, another departure. He remains near the Molo only briefly. The political heart of Venice is active now. Officials move toward government spaces. Servants stand in attendance. Foreign visitors arrive with the uncertain posture of people learning where they may and may not go. The gondolier is close enough to observe the surface of power, not its decisions. The Republic is governed by institutions whose names and rituals may sound immense councils. Magistracies, patrician offices, the Doge and the ceremonies surrounding him. But from canal level, government has feet. It needs transport. It produces papers. It sends messengers. It requires servants. It occupies buildings that must be cleaned and repaired. Power, too, has an everyday body. The gondolier watches a well-dressed figure disappear toward a stone entrance. Then he looks back to the water. His own authority extends no farther than the boat. Here, at least. Knowledge runs in the opposite direction. A patrician may command servants and sit in council, but if he cannot row, then for the length of a journey he depends upon a working man standing behind him. The gondolier does not need to resent this or take pride in it. Dependence is simply part of a city. A ruler depends upon a porter, a merchant upon a clerk, a household upon a servant, a ship upon rope, a gondola upon the hand that guides the oar. The thought dissolves as soon as another passenger approaches. They leave San Marco and move toward the quieter side canals again. The afternoon has not yet arrived fully, but the light is beginning to change from the hard clarity of noon. Shadows lengthen by degrees. The water becomes more reflective as the sun lowers. The gondolier passes a workshop where pigments are being handled somewhere within. Venice is a city of painting as well as trade. Altarpieces, portraits, decorative work, large canvases, painted facades, colored fabrics, glass, printed images. Visual richness belongs to the environment. But the gondolier encounters art mostly as surroundings. A painted church interior glimpsed through an open doorway. A decorated palace facade above his head. A workshop delivery. A figure carrying materials. He does not need to know the names later generations will memorize. Titian, Tintoretto, Veronese. Those names belong to the same city, but the Renaissance is larger than famous men. It is also apprentices grinding pigments, printers lifting paper, carpenters shaping wood, women spinning and sewing, stonecutters working Istrian stone, boatmen carrying everyone between one task and another. A period becomes an age only afterward. While it is happening, it is simply today. The gondolier turns into another canal. A barge is unloading roofing tiles. Their red surfaces make a small island of color against grey water and pale stone. Nearby, someone carries charcoal in coarse sacks. Fuel, building material, food, cloth. Every object entering Venice must be handled. The city cannot survive on beauty alone. This truth repeats everywhere, but each time it arrives through a different material. Timber at the arsenal, fish at Rialto, charcoal at a landing, rainwater beneath a campo, bread from an oven. The gondolier understands none of these as symbols. He understands whether they block his passage. He slows for the unloading boat. The passenger behind him waits. A sack is lifted. A worker steps aside. There is room. The gondola slips through. In the narrow wake, the hull rocks gently. The gondolier corrects with one foot and a subtle movement of the oar. For a few seconds the canal is filled with the smell of charcoal dust and damp rope. Then another corner changes everything. Now there is cooking. A household kitchen somewhere above the canal sends down the scent of onions and warm fat. A window is open despite the cold. The smell settles briefly over the water. The gondolier has eaten, but the body notices anyway. Smell does not care whether hunger has been answered. The passenger disembarks at a quieter landing. The gondolier receives payment and remains there for a moment. He rubs one hand against the other. The skin is dry in places, damp in others. Cold and friction have left their own pattern. The oar rests, the canal moves beneath him. A few leaves or scraps drift slowly against the wall. Water touches stone with the same patient rhythm it had before dawn. Only the city above it has changed. Morning urgency has become sustained labor. The baker's first fire is now bread in other people's hands. The fish unloaded before sunrise has moved into baskets and kitchens. Merchants have opened accounts. Officials have crossed toward offices. Shipwrights have spent hours beneath the sound of hammers. Servants have made journeys no one will remember. The gondolier has carried passenger after passenger through all of it. Yet the day still feels far from finished. The light has begun its gradual descent, but there are many crossings left before darkness. A figure appears at the far end of the fondamenta and raises a hand toward the water. The gondolier straightens. He places the oar securely against the forecollar. The boat leaves the wall. The canal widens by a few feet ahead, and the afternoon city continues beyond the next bridge. The raised hand belongs to a woman waiting beside the canal with another figure a few steps behind her. The gondolier brings the boat close. She is not dressed like a laborer. The fabric of her outer clothing is finer, the cut more deliberate, but she is not surrounded by the elaborate display of a great patrician procession. A servant carries what she does not carry herself. The gondola settles against the landing. The servant enters first. Then the woman steps down carefully, one hand resting for a moment against the side of the boat. The gondolier feels their combined weight before he sees it in the water. The hull lowers. The oar shifts. The boat moves away. Afternoon has changed the city more than the clocks alone could describe. The same stone seen earlier now holds warmer light. The same water that looked grey before sunrise has become a field of broken reflections. Where the sun reaches directly into the canal, colour trembles across the surface. Where buildings lean close, the water remains almost black. Venice carries several hours at once. A bright facade may belong to afternoon. The canal beneath it may still seem like morning shadow. The gondolier guides the passengers through one of the narroways. Above them, windows stand open to the mildest part of the day. A length of linen hangs from an upper level. Farther on, another household has placed fabric where moving air can reach it. The cloth stirs only slightly. The canal is protected from the wind here. Sounds descend instead. A conversation. The faint scrape of something being moved across a floor. A child calling from somewhere unseen. The gondolier hears these lives from below. He rarely sees entire rooms. He sees fragments, a hand closing a shutter, a basket resting near a sill. A servant leaning outward to check the water. The underside of a balcony. A door open just long enough for someone to pass. For a man who spends his working life moving through Venice, the city is strangely incomplete. He knows thousands of thresholds. He knows very few interiors. Perhaps every worker knows a city in this way. The porter knows the stair, but not the family. The servant knows the family, but does not own the room. The mason knows the wall before the inhabitant knows the house. The gondolier knows the water entrance, the landing, the safest angle of arrival. A city is different depending on which parts of its work has allowed a person to touch. The passenger says something quietly to her servant. The words stay within the boat. The gondolier does not turn. Privacy is expected even when privacy is imperfect. Only a short distance separates him from those he carries. Yet the structure of the gondola and the customs of the city create another kind of distance. Covered passenger boats can shield faces from weather and observation. In a society attentive to reputation, rank, family and appearance, moving unseen has its uses. A visit to a relative, a journey to a convent, a private appointment, a household errand. The gondolier does not need to decide which. The city contains enough real business without inventing secrets for every covered boat. He rows. The passengers sit. A church bell crosses the canal. The woman makes a small movement at the sound, almost too slight to interpret. Then the boat passes into another patch of sunlight. A bridge approaches. People are crossing above. One pauses briefly at the crest and looks down. From the bridge, the gondola appears small. From the gondola, the bridge fills the sky. The gondolier lowers his posture slightly as they enter the shadow beneath the arch. Cool air rests there. The sound of the oar becomes deeper. The boat emerges on the other side and continues toward a busier waterway. Traffic has changed again since noon. Morning had been shaped by arrival fish, fuel produce, servants going toward markets, merchants moving toward business. Afternoon includes return. Goods have been purchased. Messages have been delivered. Visits have begun or ended. People who crossed the city earlier now cross again, carrying the consequences of the morning with them. A servant returns with a lighter purse and heavier basket. A merchant leaves one meeting for another. A craftsman carries finished work. A messenger moves toward someone who has been waiting. The gondolier participates in all these journeys without knowing their conclusions. His day is made of beginnings and arrivals, belonging to other people. He receives passengers in the middle of their stories, then releases them before those stories are complete. The woman and servant disembark near another residential landing. The gondolier accepts payment. For a moment, he watches them disappear through a doorway. Then the doorway closes. Nothing remains of the journey except a little disturbed water. He pushes away. The next passenger is not waiting yet. The gondolier lets the boat move slowly through the canal. There is no urgency to the stroke. The afternoon has found a quieter rhythm between the busiest periods of the day. He passes beneath a line of windows where laundry has been hung. White cloth catches the sunlight. Dark wool absorbs it. A shirt moves in the faint air. This ordinary display tells more about the city than any formal procession could. Clothes must be washed. Water must be carried. Fabric must be repaired. Beds must be aired. Meals must be prepared. Behind the visible magnificence of Venice, domestic work repeats each day with almost no public recognition. Women perform much of it. Servants perform much of it. Children contribute where they can. A household survives through tasks too small to be commemorated. The gondolier has his own repetitions. The oar enters water again. He leans, the boat answers. He passes another gondola. A brief warning call prevents the two hulls from meeting at the turn. The other boatman responds. For only a second they face one another. Then each disappears around a different corner. There must be many gondoliers working today. Some are attached to households. Some wait at public crossings. Some operate independently or through arrangements tied to specific traghetti. Each has his own pattern of fares, obligations, waiting, weather, and fatigue. They share a profession, but not necessarily a life. The gondolier follows the canal toward a landing where several people have gathered. One is a merchant. His clothing is good but practical. He carries the impression of someone who spends more time around accounts and warehouses than ceremony. He steps aboard. The destination takes them toward Rialto again. The gondolier turns west. Returning to the commercial heart of Venice at this hour is unlike arriving there in the morning. The market has not vanished, but its tempo has changed. Some goods are diminished. Some stalls are less crowded. Waste from the day's trading has begun to collect near places that were orderly before sunrise. Fish scales cling to wet surfaces. Vegetable leaves lie crushed. Wooden containers have changed hands or been emptied. Porters still move. Merchants still talk. Coins still pass. But morning expectation has become afternoon evidence. The market shows that a day has happened to it. The gondolier brings the merchant toward the crowded water near Rialto. Spice merchants remain somewhere beyond the quays. Warehouses hold goods whose origins stretch across seas. The Fondaco dei Tedeschi stands near the commercial center, binding foreign merchants to the regulated order of the Republic. German voices are not unusual here, nor are other accents. The gondolier may not understand every word he hears. He does not need to. Trade has its own visible grammar, a ledger, a sealed bundle, a servant waiting, a hand indicating quantity, a porter bending beneath weight, a boat riding low with cargo. Money makes distant places legible without making them familiar. He passes beneath the Rialto Bridge once more. Its stone arch contains a different light now. Morning had entered from one direction. Afternoon comes from another. The shadows beneath the bridge have shifted. The sound has not. Water voices steps overhead the oar. The gondolier emerges among the dense movement near the market. He places the merchant ashore. Almost immediately, another potential passenger appears, a foreigner. This man hesitates before stepping into the gondola. He looks at the water as though still unconvinced that this is how one moves through a major city. The gondolier waits. Visitors reveal Venice by what they find surprising. The local inhabitant does not stare at a water door. The visitor does. The Venetian does not wonder why supplies arrive by boat. The visitor notices. A Venetian child grows up understanding that a canal can be a road, a boundary, a workplace, and a danger at the same time. A traveler may need several days simply to stop expecting dry streets. The foreigner boards. The gondolier pushes off. From the passenger's posture, every turn may seem worth observing. He looks toward facades, toward bridges, toward boats loaded with goods, toward narrow canals disappearing between buildings. Perhaps he will later write about what he saw. Travelers do this. They turn the ordinary life of another person into description. The gondolier himself will probably leave no written account of today. No one will ask him how the afternoon light appeared beneath the Rialto Bridge. No one will preserve the exact number of crossings he made. No page will record which shoulder began aching first. History is uneven in what it chooses to remember. Those who write often survive more clearly than those who carry them. Still, the unwritten day was no less real. The gondolier guides the traveller towards San Marco. The broader water opens again. The foreigner's attention shifts outward. The gondolier's attention shifts inward toward navigation. The wind has strengthened slightly across the basin. It touches the side of the boat. The gondolier corrects. A heavier vessel moves in the distance. Birds cross above. The surface of the lagoon is less smooth than it had been near noon. Autumn weather rarely owes consistency to anyone. Clouds have begun gathering toward one part of the sky, softening the sunlight. The warmth disappears from the gondolier's face. His cloak becomes useful again. The foreign traveller watches the buildings. The gondolier watches the water. The basilica and Doge's palace appear in the widening view. The passenger shifts to see more clearly. Perhaps these are the sights he expected before arriving. San Marco belongs to the image Venice presents most confidently. Stone, domes, arcades, ceremony, state, faith. But even here, ordinary movement interrupts grandeur. A porter crosses. A servant waits. A boat unloads. A worker carries something past the palace. The stones may express the permanence of the Republic. The people reveal how much effort permanence requires. The gondolier lands the visitor near the molo. The man steps ashore slowly, still looking around. For him, perhaps this crossing will remain memorable. For the gondolier, it becomes another fare. He moves away. The sky is grayer now. The afternoon light softens across the water. No rain has begun, but dampness seems to return to the air. Venice can change temperature quickly when sunlight disappears behind cloud. The gondolier's hands notice before anything else. Warm skin cools. The oar feels smoother. The air carries the lagoon more strongly. He heads toward quieter water. At one canal, a laundress works near a building. At another, a small boat carries clean cloth piled carefully above the damp bottom. Somewhere nearby, women may be spinning or sewing. The textile world of Venice extends from prestigious silk and wool trades down into ordinary domestic labor. Fabric passes through many hands before it becomes clothing. The gondolier sees its later stages. A noblewoman's heavy skirt entering a boat, a labourer's worn sleeve, sheets hanging above a canal, bundles carried toward customers, fine cloth in merchant warehouses, wool darkened by rain. Status may be woven into fabric, but weather touches it afterward. He moves on. A boy waits at the next landing with a small bundle. The gondolier brings him across a short stretch. The boy's journey lasts only minutes. The payment is small. Then he is gone. It would be easy to make every passenger significant. Most are not. That is what makes them important. A living city depends on thousands of journeys that contain no grand event. A boy crosses a canal. A woman visits another household. A tradesman reaches a client. A servant returns with bread. A friar travels between religious houses. A doctor is called somewhere. A clerk carries papers. A gondolier takes them. Life accumulates. The boat continues toward Santa Croce. The surroundings become less ceremonial. Warehouses and practical buildings appear more naturally among residences. Water entrances receive goods. A boat carrying wine rests near a quay. Another has sacks piled beneath a cover. The smells change with each stretch. Damp grain, rope, wood, a trace of wine, then something less pleasant from stagnant water near a wall. The tide has altered since morning. The city breathes with it. At some steps, the water now reaches higher than it had before. At others, the change is subtle. A gondolier who works these canals cannot ignore tides because architecture itself does not move with the water. The landing remains stone. The boat rises. The body must negotiate the difference. He approaches one such landing with care. An older passenger waits. The descent requires time. The gondolier holds the boat steady. The passenger steps aboard slowly. No one rushes. When the journey begins, the gondolier uses gentler movements. Skill changes according to what is carried. A heavy merchant and an elderly passenger are not the same load. Neither is a nervous foreign traveler or a servant balancing a basket. The gondola teaches constant adjustment. Perhaps people do too. The older passenger sits quietly. They pass a small religious shrine mounted near a corner. Its presence is easy to miss. A sacred figure inside. A little protected space. Evidence that devotion lives not only in great churches but at street level, beside daily passage. The gondolier rows past. The older passenger makes the sign of the cross. The gesture takes a second. Then the canal continues. It is possible that the gondolier does the same at other moments. It is possible that habit and faith are too intertwined to separate. But we do not need to invent his private devotion. The city supplies enough evidence around him. Churches, confraternities, feast calendars, bells, shrines, processions when the appropriate days arrive. Religion forms part of the environment even when an individual's inner life remains unknown. The passenger disembarks. A faint drizzle begins, not enough to send people indoors. Only small drops disturbing the canal. At first the gondolier notices them as dark points on the wooden surface. Then as cool touches against his hands, he draws his cloak more closely around himself. The light dims further. Wet stone deepens in color. Plaster becomes richer. Brick turns dark red. The city seems to contract slightly beneath the cloud. On a bridge overhead, footsteps quicken. A woman covers her head. A man pauses beneath an archway. The gondolier remains in the rain because water from above is only another condition of working on water below. The drizzle lasts. It is gentle enough to soften rather than interrupt the city. Small rings spread across the canal. The surface, already broken by wakes and reflections, becomes textured with thousands of circles. The oar cuts through them. A passenger waves from beneath shelter. The gondolier approaches. This man carries papers carefully protected beneath his clothing, perhaps a clerk, perhaps a messenger. The precise role is uncertain. The care given to the papers is not. In a city of government and commerce, written information has value. The gondolier carries him toward another district. The rain creates a quieter world around them. Voices are still present, but fewer people linger outdoors. Windows close, fabric is pulled inward. Market activity withdraws under cover. Smoke from chimneys hangs differently in damp air. The smell of wet masonry strengthens. Then they pass near a bakery. Warm bread reaches the canal. The contrast is almost comforting. Cold rain, wet stone, hot ovens. For a moment the gondolier remembers his meal hours earlier. The body has begun moving toward hunger again. The day is long. He does not count his labor in modern hours, but his muscles do. The shoulders are heavier, hands no longer close around the oar with morning freshness. The lower back has been balancing against the boat since before sunrise. Fatigue does not arrive suddenly. It removes small amounts of ease. The gondolier compensates. His movements remain practiced. The passenger reaches his destination. The rain becomes lighter. By the time the gondolier turns away, only occasional drops touch the canal. The cloud begins to thin toward the west. Late sunlight finds an opening. It enters beneath the clouds at a lower angle than before and strikes the upper buildings. Venice changes again. Wet facades catch gold. Windows flare briefly. The water receives long bands of copper and pale yellow. Every ripple tears the colors apart and rebuilds them. The gondolier slows, not to admire the view. There is another boat ahead, yet the result is the same. For several quiet strokes he remains inside the changing light. Perhaps beauty does not require attention in order to affect a life. Perhaps a person can work inside something beautiful for years without naming it, and still carry some part of it home. The wet handle rests against his palm. The boat moves forward. A bell begins to ring. This sound is different now because the light is different. Morning bells open the city. These bells begin turning thought toward evening. Shops will not all close at once. Work will not stop with a single sound. But the direction of the day has changed. The gondolier knows it. Passengers know it. Servants know it. Households begin thinking about meals. Workers think about taverns or home. Merchants begin concluding what can be concluded. People who traveled outward begin traveling back. The city has inhaled through the day. Soon it will begin to exhale. The gondolier is not finished. A woman and servant need passage. Then a tradesman. Then a man carrying a small bundle. Each crossing moves beneath increasingly low light. Oil lamps begin appearing within interiors before they are truly needed outdoors. A yellow point glows behind glass. Another appears in a window farther down a canal. At first they seem weak beside the fading daylight. They will grow more important as the sky darkens. The gondolier passes a tavern. Voices gather inside. The smell of wine reaches the water. Someone laughs. Working men have begun arriving. The gondolier continues past. His own work follows the movement of others. When they stop, he may still be needed to carry them home. A tavern can become a passenger later. A government office can become a passenger. A household visit can become a passenger. Evening creates its own demand. The Grand Canal appears ahead again. Its surface is darker now, except where the final light stretches across it. More lamps glow along the edges. Boat silhouettes sharpen against reflection. The gondolier joins the traffic. He recognizes the changing mood without needing to describe it. Morning had been outward. Afternoon had been restless. Evening begins to fold the city inward. A servant returning home steps aboard. The gondolier carries him past palaces whose upper windows now hold warm light. Behind some of those windows, meals are being prepared. In others, candles or oil lamps illuminate people gathering in rooms the gondolier will never see. The water remains his corridor between them. He leaves the servant at a landing. Another passenger waits almost immediately. The gondolier turns. The oar enters darkening water. Above the roofs, the last pale portion of sky is narrowing. Somewhere ahead, another bell begins, and along the canal, one by one, the lamps are becoming brighter than the day. The first passenger of the darker hour steps aboard beneath the glow of a small lamp near the landing. Its flame is modest. It does not illuminate the canal so much as create a circle of visibility around itself, a hand, a sleeve, the edge of a stone step, the wet surface of the gondola. Beyond that circle, Venice is already beginning to withdraw into shadow. The gondolier steadies the boat. His passenger settles. The oar enters the water once more. Night does not descend upon Venice all at once. It gathers first in the narrowest canals, where tall buildings hide what remains of the sky. It gathers beneath bridges. It gathers inside doorways and beneath balconies. The open basin still holds a faint trace of evening, while the side canals have already become corridors of darkness. As the gondola moves, the city begins replacing sunlight with flame. Oil lamps appear behind windows. Candles glow in upper rooms. A lantern swings beside an entrance. Farther away, a servant carries light through a doorway and disappears. Each flame is small enough that darkness remains the greater presence. There is no modern illumination washing fast, aids evenly through the night. A palace that had displayed every carving in afternoon light now reveals only a few windows. A bridge may emerge as a black arch against slightly paler sky. A narrow canal may be understood mostly through sound. The gondolier knows these waterways in darkness because he knew them before seeing them clearly. A wall is where experience says it will be. A bend arrives after a familiar distance. A bridge announces itself through echo. The water changes before the eyes can fully explain why. Years of movement have turned geography into instinct. The passenger speaks softly from behind him. The voice seems closer at night. Daytime Venice had placed layers of sound between people market cries, cargo, bells, workshops, footsteps, bargaining, hammering, shouting across water. Now those layers are thinning. A single conversation can travel farther. An oar stroke can be heard before another boat is visible. The gondolier listens. At a blind turn, a warning call comes through the darkness. He answers. The approaching boat appears a moment later, marked partly by its lantern. Two hulls slide past with little room between them. For an instant, the light from one vessel touches the face of the other boatman. Then both men continue into separate darkness. Night travel requires greater care. Light is not merely decorative. Boats moving after dark may carry lanterns so that they can be seen. Authorities concerned with order also watch the waterways and streets after the city's daytime rhythms have faded. Venice has magistrates and patrols devoted to nocturnal order because darkness creates possibilities that daylight limits. But the gondolier's night is not primarily a world of danger, it is still a world of work. People still need to return home. Visitors still leave houses. Servants still carry messages. Taverns still hold customers who will later require passage. The city has not stopped. It has simply become quieter about continuing. The passenger reaches a landing. The gondolier brings the boat close. A servant with a lamp waits above the steps. Light descends onto the water in a trembling column. The passenger rises, places one foot on wet stone, then the other. The servant turns. The lamp retreats toward the doorway. A moment later the entrance closes, and the canal is darker than before. The gondolier remains. His body has been working since the city itself was mostly shadow. Now shadow has returned. Between those two darknesses lies the entire day. His shoulders carry it. His hands carry it. His legs carry it. The body remembers hours even when the mind does not count them. He flexes his fingers. The skin along his palms has softened in some places from dampness and hardened in others from repeated contact. The handle of the oar is familiar enough to feel almost shaped around his grip, though it is his grip that has been shaped by the oar. He pushes away. A tavern lies ahead along the canal. It announces itself before the doorway appears. Voices, a brief rise of laughter, the smell of wine, cooked fish perhaps, or onions, or something warm enough to distinguish itself from the cold water outside. The gondolier passes slowly. Men sit within. Some are sailors or laborers. Others may be craftsmen whose tools have been put aside. Gambling, drinking, conversation, and companionship belong to parts of Venetian nightlife, though not every tavern is disorderly, and not every night is carnival. The Venice of masks and endless revelry belongs too easily to later imagination. Tonight is an ordinary night. No great festival is required. No procession fills the water. No serenade follows every gondola. The city is compelling enough without performing for us. A man emerges from the tavern and pauses at the canal. He sees the gondolier. A hand rises. Another fare. The gondola approaches. The passenger enters less carefully than those who boarded earlier in the day, but he settles soon enough. The boat moves again. The smell of wine accompanies him for a while. The gondolier guides them toward a quieter district. Warm tavern voices disappear behind stone. A church bell begins somewhere farther away. The sound travels through the dark city with remarkable clarity. Another bell answers from another direction. Then silence returns between them. At this hour, bells do more than divide time. They alter behavior. Doors close. Workshops fall quiet. People understand that the public day is narrowing. Venetian authorities regulate nocturnal movement more closely than daylight movement, and darkness belongs partly to watchmen, patrols, household servants carrying lights, late workers, and those whose business has not yet ended. The gondolier continues. His passenger disembarks. Payment passes through hands barely visible. The boat is empty again. He turns into a side canal. Here the darkness is deeper. Only one upper window shows light. The flame behind it turns the glass amber. Someone moves across the room. A shadow interrupts the glow. Then the figure disappears. The gondolier sees nothing more. From another building comes the subdued sound of dishes or utensils being handled. Households are eating. In some rooms, servants continue working while those they serve sit at table. In poorer rooms, the distinction between worker and household is smaller. Bread is divided, wine is poured, fish or legumes may be shared. A fire gives heat where fuel can be afforded. The city that spent daylight facing outward now turns toward interiors. The gondolier remains outside them all. He passes beneath their windows like a thought that belongs to no household. Water touches the stone. The oar rises. A drop falls from its blade. There are places where even the sound of that drop seems clear. He enters another canal where the tide has left the lower masonry dark. The smell is stronger here. Damp stone, lagoon water, organic matter caught where the current moves poorly, perhaps waste from nearby households. Premodern Venice is not perfumed into innocence by its palaces, nor is it continuously drowning in filth. The tide carries some things away. Rain comes. Waste is moved or discarded in different ways. Fresh water is gathered through the city's cistern systems rather than taken from the brackish canals. Daily survival depends upon understanding distinctions that outsiders might not immediately see. There is water everywhere, and yet drinkable water remains precious. The gondolier knows which water belongs to which need. Water to carry a boat, water collected for drinking, water falling from the sky, water rising with the tide. They share a name, but not a purpose. The gondola passes a small shrine near a corner. A lamp burns beside the sacred image. It is one of the few fixed points of light in the canal. For a moment, carved or painted features become visible. Then the boat moves beyond them. The sacred recedes into darkness. Another passenger waits ahead. This one is accompanied by a lantern bearing servant. The gondolier comes alongside. Fine clothing becomes visible briefly under the flame. The passenger boards beneath the partial shelter of the gondola. The servant either follows or remains behind according to the journey before them. The boat turns. The Thurfels encloses the passenger from the cold and from easy observation. Night makes its privacy even greater. A covered gondola moving through dark canals can carry someone without allowing every person at every bridge to recognize them. That possibility has made such boats useful for discreet journeys. Yet discretion is not the same as intrigue. The passenger may be returning from an ordinary visit. The gondolier does not need a scandal to explain silence. He performs his work without turning curiosity into certainty. A voice from within asks something. The gondolier answers briefly. Then only the oar speaks. The journey takes them toward a broader canal. The wind reaches them more easily. After the enclosed warmth around the buildings, it feels sharper. November has settled fully into the night. The gondolier draws the cloak close where movement allows. His breath is faintly visible when the light catches it. Across the water, another lantern travels in the opposite direction. Behind it, a gondola becomes visible and disappears. There are fewer boats now. Spacing widens. The Grand Canal, so crowded earlier, possesses patches of open dark water. The gondolier enters one of them. For perhaps the first time since dawn, he can hear the city without immediately hearing commerce. The palaces are still present. Their facades rise black against the sky. Some hold clusters of illuminated windows. Others seem almost abandoned until a candle moves behind a curtain. The water doors below are shut. Warehouses have quieted. Ropes hold boats against posts. Goods unloaded during daylight are now somewhere inside. All the movement of morning has become storage. The gondolier rows beneath the Rialto Bridge again. Night has changed it most of all. During the day, the bridge was architecture surrounded by activity. Now it is mass and shadow. The great arch frames darkness beyond. A few lights mark shops or nearby buildings, but the stone itself no longer offers every detail to the eye. Footsteps cross overhead, fewer than before. A voice passes above and disappears. The gondola enters the arch. Sound gathers. The oar touches water. A hollow echo returns. The passenger remains hidden. For a few strokes, bridge and boat occupy the same darkness. Then they emerge. Rialto is quieter, but not empty. The commercial day has left traces. Stalls have been cleared or closed. Fragments remain where goods were sold. The fish market no longer carries its morning intensity, though its smell has not entirely gone. Wine shops still receive customers. A worker carries something through a doorway. Someone sweeps. Someone closes shutters. A city does not simply stop being a market. It must clean after itself. It must secure what remains. It must prepare to begin again. The gondolier leaves his passenger at a landing. He remains nearby for a little while. No one immediately approaches. Waiting returns. This time, it feels different. During daylight, waiting had been a pause inside abundance. Now it opens space around him. The gondolier rests the oar and listens. A distant bell, a door, footsteps, the soft bump of another boat against a mooring post. Then water. The water has been present beneath everything, beneath the market, beneath government, beneath prayer, beneath argument, beneath wealth, beneath labor. The city changes its activities by the hour, but the lagoon never leaves. Perhaps that is why Venice can feel older at night. When human noise diminishes, the element beneath the city becomes easier to hear. The gondolier has lived his entire working day a few inches above it. He has trusted wood to separate his body from it. He has balanced over it, earned money from it, read tides in it, carried strangers across it. The water does not know what any passenger was worth. It lifted every hull according to weight. A man approaches. The gondolier straightens. Work continues. This passenger wears the practical clothing of someone returning from labor rather than entertainment. He steps into the boat and gives his destination. They turn northward. The gondolier begins moving gradually back toward the world from which he started before dawn. Not directly. There are still crossings to make. But the shape of the night now bends toward home. The route passes through canals that had been busy hours earlier. The differences are striking without being dramatic. A workshop that rang with hammering is dark. A quay where men unloaded goods is empty. A door that remained open throughout the afternoon is closed. The stone remembers nothing visible about the people who stood upon it. Tomorrow they will return. This is how ordinary life survives history, not through a single extraordinary day, through recurrence. The baker will wake before many customers. The porter will lift weight again. The servant will cross water. The merchant will open accounts. The priest will hear bells. The gondolier will place an oar against the forcular. Repetition can sound like monotony when described from far away. From inside a life, it is structure. It allows people to know where they belong when the day begins. The passenger disembarks. Another waits farther ahead. The gondolier takes him across a shorter distance. then another. The fares come less frequently now. Between them, longer stretches of quiet appear. The gondolier passes a church. The doors are closed. A little light remains near one side. The stone facade catches almost nothing from the sky. Above it, the bell tower is mostly silhouette. The same bells that structured daylight now seem to belong to the darkness itself. He moves on. At another turn, water reflects a lantern hanging from a bracket. The reflection elongates as the gondola approaches. Gold becomes a wavering line. The bow breaks it. For an instant the light disappears into fragments around the hull. Then, behind the boat, it joins itself again. The gondolier does not see this. He faces forward. Perhaps some of the most beautiful things in a life happen behind us while we are occupied with continuing. The night deepens. The cold becomes more persistent. His hands have lost the warmth generated by the busiest hours. He adjusts his grip. Every long day eventually reduces ambition to smaller needs. Warmth, food, dry clothing, a place to sit, sleep. The grandeur of the Republic offers little protection against simple exhaustion. A palace may own paintings and marble. A gondolier may own almost nothing of comparable value. But when bodies grow tired, both inhabit the same ancient human condition. Muscles ask for rest. Eyes grow heavy. The mind narrows. Tomorrow can wait. He takes another passenger, a woman and companion leaving a household. The gondolier moves carefully toward their destination. Their lantern makes the interior glow faintly. The boat slips through a residential canal. Above, most windows are dark. A few remain illuminated. One may belong to a servant finishing work, another to someone reading, another to a sick person awake longer than the household, another to people still talking over wine. We cannot know. The unknown should be allowed to remain unknown. There is peace in leaving some windows closed. The gondolier carries the passengers without entering their lives. At the landing they leave. He turns away. Now there are no raised hands nearby, no voices calling for passage. He begins rowing toward Cannaregio. The city feels larger when fewer people are moving through it. Distances seem longer. Bridges stand alone over water. Canals that felt crowded in daylight now hold entire stretches of darkness without another boat. He knows them still, one turn, another. A familiar facade, a low arch, a wider opening. The route home is not a separate journey from work. It is the final movement within the same physical knowledge. His shoulders are heavy, but his strokes remain economical. No strength is wasted. The boat glides farther with each measured movement than a novice might expect. The gondolier has spent the day learning nothing new about rowing. That may be the mark of mastery. He does not discover the oar each morning. He returns to something his body already knows. Along a quiet stretch, a patrol boat appears. Men charged with nocturnal order move through the waterways. Their presence is another reminder that Venice continues governing after sunset. Night belongs neither completely to secrecy nor completely to sleep. Authorities remain awake. Watchmen remain awake. Servants remain awake. Sailors remain awake. People whose work begins before dawn may already be sleeping, while others have not yet gone home. No city sleeps all at once. The patrol passes. The gondolier continues. A faint mist begins forming again close to the water. Not the dense fog of the previous pre-dawn, only a softening along the farther edges of the canal. The cold has returned enough for moisture to gather. Lamplight becomes blurred at a distance. The city's hard stone outlines begin losing precision. Day had revealed. Night is simplifying. A wall becomes shape. A bridge becomes arch. A person becomes footsteps. A gondola becomes the sound of an oar. The gondolier approaches the area where his own working day began. Recognition arrives through small things. The angle of a canal, a landing, a familiar mooring place, a building whose lower wall he has probably passed too many times to notice consciously. The boat slows. There is no audience for the final maneuver. No passenger watches his skill. No merchant waits. No servant pays. The gondolier brings the hull gently toward its place. Wood approaches wood. The contact is soft. He reaches for rope. His fingers are colder now and slower than they were before sunrise. The rope passes through his hands. He secures the gondola. The tide will continue changing while he is away. The boat must remain where he expects to find it. He checks what needs checking. The oar is handled with the familiarity of a tool that has shared the entire day. There may be water to remove again before tomorrow. Wood may need attention. Rope will wear. Nothing useful stays useful without maintenance. The gondolier steps onto stone. For the second time today, the ground does not move beneath him. This time his legs notice more strongly. Hours of balance have left their quiet fatigue. He stands for a moment. The canal beside him continues moving. He does not. The distinction feels almost luxurious. Somewhere behind the buildings, a final cluster of tavern voices rises. Farther away, a bell marks another hour, according to the Venetian night. The gondolier begins walking. His room is not a palace. No marble stair waits for him. No servant holds a lamp at the entrance. The working people of Venice often live in more crowded, modest quarters among families whose lives leave few permanent traces in the city's celebrated architecture. Yet home does not require celebration to be home. A doorway can be enough. Dryness can be enough. Food can be enough. A place to lie down after standing on water for an entire day can be more desirable than any decorated hall. He disappears from the canal. We do not follow him into a private life the records do not give us. We can let the doorway close. Outside, Venice remains. The gondola is tied in darkness. A little moisture settles onto its wooden surface. The forecollar is still. The canal moves gently around the hull. Not far away, another boat passes. Its lantern is small and yellow. A late passenger is still traveling. Somewhere a watchman continues his route. Somewhere a servant closes a shutter. Somewhere a candle burns lower. Somewhere bread for another day has not yet begun, though before long an oven will need fire again. The lagoon is darker than the sky. The tide continues without bells. It rises or falls according to forces older than the Republic, older than its palaces, older than the gondolas moving across it. Stone foundations stand inside that movement. Timber posts accept the water. Ropes tighten. Reflections stretch and vanish. The city has become quiet enough that small sounds matter. A ripple against a step. A rope creaking under tension. A distant footfall over a bridge. The faint knock of one moored hull. Then a long interval with almost nothing. Venice has not ended. It has only become difficult to see. Behind walls, people sleep. Others remain awake. The Doge's palace stands beside the basin whether councils are meeting or not. The Rialto Bridge spans the canal whether merchants cross it or not. The arsenal waits behind its walls, its timber, tools, and ships ready for another working day. Markets will fill again. churches will ring again. Water entrances will open. Goods will arrive. Passengers will appear beside landings and raise their hands. And somewhere in Cannaregio, after enough darkness has passed, a working man will wake. Perhaps the same gondolier, perhaps another. A shirt will be pulled on, a cloak lifted against the damp, a door opened. Cold air will enter. Someone will walk toward water. There will be no announcement that another day of history has begun. There never was. There will only be the quiet, practical movements from which history is made. A rope untied, a hole checked, an oar lifted, a boat pushed away from stone. And long before Venice understands itself as beautiful, someone will already be carrying it across the water,